Razor's claws tore through the metal barricade like paper. The screaming of the defenders meant nothing to him anymore. 8 cycles of war had taught him that prey always screamed before they stopped moving. His pack followed behind him, 12 other dread hounds bred for one purpose only: destruction. The collar around his neck buzzed with a familiar pain. His handlers were watching from orbit, making sure he stayed focused on the kill, not that he needed the reminder. Razor had never known anything except battle. From the moment he opened his eyes in the breeding facility, pain and hunger had shaped every choice. Obey or suffer, fight or starve. There was no third option. Target 7 spread out before him, a planet covered in green forests and blue oceans. The Valorian Empire wanted it, so the dread hounds came first to clear the way. They always did. Razor stood 12 feet tall at the shoulder, his obsidian fur rippling over muscles designed for maximum damage. His teeth could crush steel. His speed made him faster than most vehicles. The Valorians had spent centuries perfecting creatures like him. The settlement ahead showed signs of desperate defense. Walls made from local materials. Primitive energy shields that flickered and died under sustained assault. Small bipedal creatures running between buildings, trying to evacuate their young. Razor had seen it all before on 16 other worlds. This one would fall just like the rest. His pack spread out in practiced formation. The handlers called it tactical deployment. Razor just knew that surrounding prey made them easier to catch. He leaped over a burning vehicle and landed in the settlement's main square. Bodies lay scattered around, some still moving weakly. These defenders had soft skin that tore easily. Their weapons barely scratched his hide. A group of them formed a defensive line near a large building with a red symbol on its walls. They fired their projectile weapons at him without stopping. The rounds bounced off or buried themselves shallow in his thick fur. Razor charged. 3 seconds later, the line broke. The survivors fled into the building. He followed. The structure collapsed partially when he forced his bulk through the entrance. Dust filled the air. Somewhere in the darkness he heard breathing, slow and controlled, not panicked like the others. His golden eyes adjusted instantly to the low light. A single defender sat. Propped against a wall, one leg twisted at a wrong angle beneath rubble. Razor approached slowly, savoring the moment before the kill, but something felt different. The small creature wasn't scrambling away, wasn't screaming or begging. It just looked at him with dark eyes that held exhaustion instead of terror. "You're even bigger up close," the creature said. Its voice was calm, almost conversational. 12 feet, maybe 13. I've only seen you from a distance before." Razor stopped. Prey didn't talk to him. They ran or fought or died quietly. They never just sat there having a conversation. His muscles tensed, waiting for a trick or trap. The creature shifted slightly and winced. "Sorry, I'd stand up, but my leg's pretty much destroyed. Name's David. David Rivers. I'm a medic, if that means anything to you." It gestured at the supplies scattered around, strange devices and bandages covered in dark red fluid. "Was trying to get civilians out when your friends brought the building down." David, the sound pattern seemed important somehow, like it meant something beyond just noise. Razor tilted his massive head, studying this bizarre behavior. "You probably can't understand me," David continued, "but I'm too tired to be scared anymore, seen too much today, lost too many people." He pulled out a small rectangular device and touched its surface. Images appeared, glowing in the darkness. "This is my family, my sister, her kids. They're back on Earth, our home world. Probably don't even know I'm out here fighting." Razor's eyes fixed on the images. Small creatures like David, but younger. They stood next to a 4-legged animal that looked remarkably similar to Razor himself, just much smaller. The tiny version had its mouth open in what seemed like happiness, not aggression. "That's Bruno," David said, following Razor's gaze. "Best dog in the world, loyal, loving, would do anything to protect us. You look like him, you know, if he was massive and terrifying." A weak laugh escaped David's lips. "Kind of funny, isn't it? We're being killed by something that looks like man's best friend." The collar buzzed again, harder this time. Razor's handlers were getting impatient. Complete the kill, return to the pack, continue the assault, standard procedure. He had done it thousands of times. David reached for something at his belt. Razor's body tensed automatically, ready to strike. But the creature just pulled out a container and opened it, clear liquid inside. "Water," David said. "Probably useless offering it to you, but sharing's what humans do." He held it out with a steady hand. Nobody had ever offered Razor anything. Food came in chunks thrown on the floor, water in buckets he shared with the pack. Everything was given as fuel, never as kindness. The concept didn't exist in his world. His massive head lowered slightly toward the offered container. David didn't flinch, didn't pull away, just kept his hand extended like it was the most natural thing in existence. The collar activated fully, sending pain through Razor's nervous system. His handlers were commanding him directly now. "Kill the target. Do it now. Report back immediately." Razor looked at David, then at the glowing images of his family and the small creature called Bruno, then at his own reflection in a broken piece of metal nearby. For the first time in 8 cycles of absolute obedience, a thought formed in his mind that had never existed before. What if there was a third option? His jaws opened wide. Razor's jaws closed around the pain collar instead of David's throat. The metal device crunched between his teeth like a dried bone. Sparks flew as the circuits shorted out. The constant background pain that had lived in his neck for 8 cycles suddenly vanished. For 3 full seconds, Razor just stood there, experiencing true silence in his own body for the first time. Then the alarm started. Somewhere in orbit, his handlers were seeing the telemetry. Collar destroyed. Dreadhound gone rogue. It had happened before with other war beasts. The response was always the same: termination. David stared at him with wide eyes. "Did you just break your own collar?" Razor turned his massive head toward the human. Without the collar's influence, his mind felt clearer than it ever had. Thoughts came easier, faster. He had always been intelligent, but the constant pain and control had buried it under layers of programmed violence. "You can understand me," David said quietly. It wasn't a question. Something in Razor's eyes must have changed. "And you chose not to kill me." A roar echoed from outside. Razor's pack had noticed his absence. The other dread hounds were still collared, still obedient. They would come for him now, following handler orders to eliminate the traitor. He had maybe 5 minutes before they arrived in force. Razor moved to the collapsed entrance and pushed rubble aside with his snout. His body blocked the opening, creating a defensive position. If his former packmates wanted David, they would have to go through him first. "You're protecting me," David said, his voice full of wonder. "Why, we're enemies. My people are trying to kill yours." Razor turned back and made a low rumbling sound. Not a growl of aggression, something softer. He didn't have words yet, didn't know how to shape human sounds with his mouth, but he could communicate intent. David seemed to understand. He pulled himself into a better sitting position, wincing at his shattered leg. "Okay, if you're going to fight your own kind for me, least I can do is patch myself up properly." His hands moved quickly over his injuries, applying bandages and strange chemical compounds that made the bleeding stop. The first of Razor's former pack arrived. Shadow, a dread hound he had fought beside for 6 cycles. She crashed through a wall instead of using the entrance, her eyes locked on Razor with confusion and anger. The handlers had sent her. Trusted packmate turned executioner. Razor met her charge head-on. Their bodies collided with enough force to crack the floor beneath them. They had sparred countless times before, but this was different. Shadow fought to kill. Razor fought to protect. He was bigger, stronger, more experienced. But Shadow had the collar's pain driving her forward, making her ignore damage that should have stopped her. Her teeth found his shoulder. Her claws raked his side. Razor refused to give ground. David was behind him. That simple fact changed everything. For the first time in his existence, Razor wasn't fighting because he was ordered to. He was fighting because he chose to. The difference gave him strength he never knew he possessed. He threw Shadow across the room. She hit hard, stunned long enough for Razor to pin her down with one massive paw. Their eyes met. Razor saw the same trapped intelligence he used to have. Shadow wasn't evil. She was enslaved, just like he had been minutes ago. He couldn't free her, not without destroying her collar. And if he tried that, she would tear his throat out following her programming. Razor released her and backed toward David again. Shadow stood slowly, clearly confused. Why was he letting her go? Why wasn't he finishing the fight? The collar buzzed on her neck, demanding she complete her mission, but something in Razor's stance made her hesitate. "Tell them I'm worth more alive," David called out suddenly. His voice was directed at Shadow, at the handlers monitoring through her collar. "I have tactical information, defensive positions. Tell them I'll trade intel for medical evacuation." It was a bluff. Razor could smell the lie on David, but the words bought them precious seconds. Shadow's collar stopped buzzing. The handlers were considering it. "There's 3 more of you coming," David said to Razor. "I can hear them. You can't fight them all, not while protecting me in this position." Razor knew he was right. He also knew that going outside meant leaving David vulnerable, but staying here meant getting overwhelmed by numbers. There was no good choice. David started pulling medical supplies into a pack. His hands moved despite the pain of his injuries. "My people had a fallback position, underground bunkers 3 blocks east. If we can reach them, you'll be safe from aerial assault. The tunnels are too small for Valorian ships to target effectively." 3 blocks might as well have been 3 miles with David's injured leg and Razor being hunted. But the alternative was waiting here to die. Razor moved close to David and lowered his body. "You want me to climb on?" David asked. "You're serious?" Razor made that soft, rumbling sound again. David hesitated only a moment before pulling himself onto Razor's back, gripping the thick fur. The weight barely registered. Razor had carried artillery pieces across battlefields. One small human was nothing. He burst through the wall at full speed, going the opposite direction Shadow had entered from. Surprise was their only advantage. The other dread hounds would expect him to defend a position, not run. David held on tighter as Razor's powerful legs ate up distance. Buildings blurred past. Enemy fire started up almost immediately, but Razor knew evasion patterns. He had been trained for every combat scenario, just never trained to be on the receiving end. "Left here," David shouted over the wind. "Underground entrance is marked with yellow stripes." Razor saw it. He also saw 2 more dread hounds closing in from parallel streets. They would intersect his path in seconds. No time to slow down, no time to think. He jumped. His body cleared 20 feet easily, landing on a rooftop. Another jump took them across to the next building. Below, the dread hounds howled in frustrated rage. The bunker entrance appeared ahead. Razor hit the ground running and dove through the opening. Darkness swallowed them both. Weapons locked onto Razor the moment he entered the bunker. 6 humans in combat gear stood in defensive positions, their projectile weapons trained on his head. Emergency lighting cast harsh shadows across their faces. Every single one of them looked terrified. "Hold fire," David shouted from Razor's back. "He's with me, he's friendly." "That thing just destroyed half our defensive line," one soldier said. Her hands shook on her weapon. "It's a dread hound. There's no such thing as a friendly dread hound." "There is now." David slid off Razor's back, barely managing to stay upright on his destroyed leg. "He broke his own collar, fought his pack to protect me. He's choosing to be here." The soldiers didn't lower their weapons. Razor understood their fear. He had killed so many of their kind. His claws still had human blood dried on them from earlier battles. Trust wasn't something he could demand. It had to be earned. He sat down slowly, making himself as small as possible for a 12-foot war beast. His ears lowered. His eyes stayed on the ground instead of meeting theirs directly. Every movement was calculated to appear non-threatening. He had spent his whole life learning body language for hunting. Now he used it for the opposite purpose. "It's sitting like a dog," another soldier whispered. David corrected firmly. "Not it. He has a name, Razor, and he saved my life when he could have killed me." A woman with commander insignia stepped forward. She kept her weapon ready, but her finger moved off the trigger. "David," I've known you for 3 years, never seen you wrong about someone's character, but this is beyond wrong if you're making a mistake. That creature could kill everyone in this bunker in 30 seconds. He could, David agreed. But he won't, because he's not a creature, he's a person who's been enslaved his entire life, and he just chose freedom. Razor watched the exchange carefully. These humans communicated with more than just words. Their body language told stories. The commander wanted to believe David but couldn't risk her people. The other soldiers were divided between trust in their medic and fear of the obvious threat in their midst. David reached into his pack and pulled out the water. Container from earlier, the same one he had offered Razor during their first meeting. He opened it and took a drink, then held it toward Razor. "Show them," David said quietly. "Show them you understand kindness." Razor lowered his massive head and drank carefully from the offered container. His tongue could have knocked it from David's hand easily. Instead, he took only a little water and pulled back, leaving plenty for the human. The simple act changed something in the room. Weapons lowered slightly. The tension didn't disappear, but it shifted into something more manageable. "He's injured," one soldier observed. "Those cuts on his shoulder and side, from fighting other dread hounds." "From protecting me," David confirmed. "He fought Shadow, one of his own pack, because she was ordered to kill him for breaking free." The commander studied Razor for a long moment. Her eyes were sharp, evaluating threats like any good military leader, but she was also looking for something else. Signs of intelligence, signs of choice. "Can you understand us?" she asked directly to Razor. He met her eyes and nodded slowly. The gesture was clumsy, not natural to his body structure, but the meaning was clear enough. Several soldiers stepped back in shock. One dropped his weapon entirely. Understanding changed everything. It meant accountability. It meant every dread hound they had killed might have been a victim rather than just a monster. "Oh God," someone muttered. "They're all like him, they're all enslaved." The commander's expression hardened with a different kind of determination. "David, get to medical. That leg needs proper treatment." She turned to the others. "Get our guests some food and clean water, real portions, not scraps." Back to Razor. "You're under our protection now, but I need to know everything you can tell us about Valorian tactics and those collars." Razor tried to speak. His mouth couldn't form the right sounds. Human words required different mouth shapes than the growls and howls he knew. Frustration built in his chest. He had so much information that could help these people, but no way to share it. David seemed to understand. "Get me a data pad, I'll work with him, we'll find a way to communicate properly." Over the next 3 hours, they developed a system. Razor would indicate yes or no with head movements. For complex information, he learned to use his claw to draw basic shapes and numbers on a dirt patch they cleared. It was slow and inefficient, but it worked. The information he provided changed everything. Valorian fleet positions, dread hound deployment patterns, weakness in the pain collar systems, the location of the breeding facility where hundreds more of his kind suffered in captivity. "There are more like you," the commander said after Razor drew rough numbers. 300 still enslaved. You want to free them." Razor nodded firmly. Those were his pack, his brothers and sisters in suffering. They deserved the same choice he had been given. "That's a suicide mission," one soldier pointed out. "The breeding facility is on a moon with heavy Valorian presence. We barely have enough people to defend this settlement." "Then we don't go with people," David said. His voice carried a strange excitement. "We go with Razor. He knows the facility. He can move through areas where humans would be detected immediately. If we can get him close enough to the collar control systems, he could free them all at once." The commander shook her head. "You're talking about one dread hound against an entire military installation." "No," David replied. "I'm talking about one person who has every reason to fight, and humans backing him up because it's the right thing to do." Razor looked around the room. These humans had every reason to hate him. He represented months of death and destruction. Yet here they were, considering a rescue mission for creatures that had killed their families and friends. He finally understood what made humans dangerous. It wasn't their technology or their tactics. It was their capacity to see past immediate threats and recognize suffering in their enemies. It was their willingness to risk everything for what they believed was right. A young soldier approached with a large container of food. Real food, not the scraps RZER usually received. The human set it down and met his eyes. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you chose us." RZER made that soft, rumbling sound again. It still wasn't words, but the meaning was clear. So was he. The captured Valorian transport ship smelled like fear and metal. RZER crouched in the cargo bay while David and 5 other humans worked on their disguises. Getting captured had been the easy part. Valorian patrols were overconfident, expecting no real resistance. The hard part would be maintaining the deception long enough to reach the breeding facility. "How do I look?" David adjusted the stolen Valorian armor. It fit poorly on his human frame, but from a distance it might pass inspection. RZER tilted his head and made a low sound that the others had learned meant disagreement. David was still limping from his injured leg, even after 2 weeks of recovery. The limp would give them away immediately. "He's right," Commander Briggs said. She had insisted on leading the mission personally. "You're staying with the ship, no arguments." "I'm the only one who can communicate with RZER properly," David protested. "And we need someone who can pilot us out if everything goes wrong." Briggs checked her weapon. "Besides, RZER and I have been practicing. We understand each other well enough." It was true. Over the past 2 weeks, RZER had learned to follow human hand signals. He still couldn't speak their language, but he could understand it. Every day, David spent hours teaching him new words, new concepts. Friend, freedom, hope, words that had never existed in his world before. The breeding facility appeared on their view screen. A cold moon orbiting a gas giant. No atmosphere, just metal structures built into the rock designed for one purpose, creating and controlling dread hounds. RZER's body tensed at the sight. Memories flooded back. Pain, hunger, the screaming of packmates who failed training. David placed a hand on RZER's shoulder. "We'll get them out, all of them." The transport received clearance to dock. Valorian security was lax because nothing ever threatened this facility. Who would be crazy enough to attack the source of their most powerful weapons? RZER would have found it funny if the situation wasn't so serious. They docked in the main hangar. Briggs led the way, walking with the confident stride of a Valorian handler. The disguise was good enough. The other soldiers followed, playing the role of escort troops. RZER walked last, wearing a damaged collar they had modified to look functional. It broadcast a fake signal, making systems think he was still under control. The facility's interior made RZER's stomach twist. Every corridor looked the same. Gray metal walls, harsh lighting, the distant sounds of dread hounds howling. He had been born in a chamber somewhere in this place, had taken his first painful steps here, had learned that survival meant absolute obedience. A Valorian handler approached. "New acquisition. Recaptured rogue," Briggs replied in the Valorian language she had been practicing. Her translator device helped with accuracy. "Command wants him reprocessed." The handler studied RZER with cold eyes. "This is the one that broke his collar on Target 7. He looks intact for a rogue. Usually we have to put them down." "He's valuable. 8 cycles of perfect service before the malfunction." Briggs kept her voice bored, like this was routine. "Command wants to know what caused the break before disposal." "Processing is 3 levels down. Collar control is Central Hub Level 5. The handler pointed. "You need authorization codes." "Already have them?" Briggs showed a data pad with stolen credentials. The information RZER provided had included security protocols. He remembered everything from his time here, every code, every guard rotation, every weakness. The handler nodded and walked away. They had minutes before someone ran a deep check on those credentials and discovered the forgery. "Move fast," Briggs whispered. The team split up. 2 soldiers headed for the communication array to jam outgoing signals. 2 more went to secure their escape route. Briggs and one other stayed with Razor, heading down toward the central hub. The howling grew louder as they descended. Razor's ears pinned back. He knew those sounds. Pain, confusion, rage with nowhere to go except inward. Every dread hound here was living the nightmare he had escaped. Level 5 opened into a massive chamber. The central hub controlled all collar systems for the facility. Dozens of Valorian technicians worked at stations, monitoring hundreds of individual dread hounds. On the walls, screens showed live feeds from the training chambers. Razor forced himself to look away. He didn't need more nightmares. "That's a lot of Valorians," the soldier muttered. Briggs checked her weapon. "Razor, you know what to do. Get to that control panel. We'll cover you." This was the point where the plan got dangerous. Razor dropped the pretense of being controlled. He charged forward at full speed. Surprise gave him 3 seconds before alarms started blaring. 3 seconds was enough. His claws tore through the main control panel, ripping out circuits and processors. Sparks flew. Screens went dark. And throughout the facility, hundreds of pain collars simultaneously shut down. The howling changed tone. Confusion became rage. Rage became action. Somewhere below them, dread hounds were experiencing their first moment of freedom. Razor knew exactly what they would do with it. The same thing he had wanted to do every day of his captivity: fight back. Valorian handlers started dying. Not all of them. Some were smart enough to run, but years of cruelty had consequences. The freed dread hounds showed no mercy to their tormentors. Briggs and her soldier fought their way back to Razor's position. Valorian security forces poured into the chamber, but they were designed to fight external threats, not an internal uprising. The freed dread hounds attacked from every direction. A massive shape burst through a wall. Razor recognized her immediately. Shadow. His former packmate looked different without the collar. Her eyes showed clarity instead of the drug-induced rage. She saw Razor and paused, confused. Razor made a series of sounds, not quite words, but close. The dread hound language of howls and growls that handlers had tried to eliminate. He told her what had happened, told her they were free, told her to run. Shadow understood. She turned and began herding other freed dread hounds toward the hangar. Some fought her, too broken by years of torture to accept help, but most followed. The instinct to form packs was stronger than programming. "We need to move now," Briggs shouted over the chaos. Explosions rocked the facility as freed dread hounds destroyed everything in reach. Razor led them through the carnage. Bodies lay everywhere, some Valorian, some dread hound. Freedom had a price, and not everyone would survive to see it. The hangar was chaos. Human soldiers fought alongside confused dread hounds against the remaining Valorian forces. David had moved the transport to the main bay doors, engines running hot. "Get them on board," Razor heard David's voice over the communication systems. "Any dread hound that wants out, we take them." Hundreds of freed war beasts poured into the hangar. Many were injured. Some were dying. All were desperate for escape. Razor stood at the transport's entrance, guiding them inside. Shadow helped, her presence calming others who might have panicked. The last Valorian defensive position collapsed. Briggs grabbed Razor and pulled him toward the ship. Time to go, now. Razor looked back one final time. The breeding facility was tearing itself apart. Fires burned across multiple levels. The screaming had stopped. In its place was an eerie silence broken only by the sound of metal grinding against metal. 300 dread hounds had been held here. 273 made it to the transport. The rest were dead or too broken to save. Razor felt each loss like a physical wound. But 273 was still 273 more than had been free yesterday. The transport lifted off as the facility's reactor went critical. Escape pods launched carrying surviving Valorians. Let them go, Razor thought. Let them tell the Empire what happened when you push living beings too far. David met him as the ship jumped to faster-than-light travel. "You did it. You actually did it." Razor looked around at the freed dread hounds crowding the cargo bay. Most were confused, many were injured, all were scared. They had known only cages and pain. Freedom was foreign and frightening. But they were free, and that was a start. Target 7 had transformed in the 3 weeks since RZER's liberation. The human settlement expanded to accommodate 273 confused dread hounds, most of whom had never experienced anything except captivity. The integration wasn't going smoothly. RZER watched from a hillside as another fight broke out in the training area. 2 younger dread hounds, barely 4 cycles old, were tearing at each other over food despite having plenty available. Nearby humans scrambled to intervene safely. "They don't understand there's enough for everyone," David said, approaching with his now-healed leg. "All they've known is competition for scraps." RZER made a low rumbling sound. He understood the problem better than anyone. The freed dread hounds were physically free but mentally still caged. Years of torture had shaped their behaviors. Some became violent at random. Others refused to eat unless they stole the food. Many couldn't sleep without the pain of a collar reminding them they were controlled. Shadow joined them on the hillside. She had become RZER's second in command, helping manage the other dread hounds. But even she struggled with sudden rages, moments where the programming overrode her newfound freedom. "How many today?" David asked. Shadow held up 3 claws. 3 dread hounds had to be sedated after becoming dangerously aggressive. It was fewer than yesterday's 5, but still too many. The humans were patient, but RZER could sense their growing fear. They had welcomed victims, but were discovering that victims could also be dangerous. A young girl approached the hillside, maybe 8 years old. She carried a ball made from salvaged materials. "Can RZER play?" she asked David directly, showing no fear of the massive war beast. "Is he in a good mood?" David asked seriously. The girl studied RZER carefully. "Yes, his ears are up and his tail isn't stiff." David smiled. "Then yes, but stay where I can see you both." The girl threw the ball. RZER chased it without thinking, his body responding to play like it was the most natural thing in the world. Maybe it was. Maybe this was what he was supposed to be before the Valorians twisted him into a weapon. He brought the ball back and dropped it at her feet. She giggled and threw it again. Shadow watched with fascination. She had never seen RZER like this, acting like the small creature called Bruno in David's pictures. "Can Shadow play too?" the girl asked. Shadow tensed. She didn't know how to play, didn't understand the concept. But the girl was offering something, extending trust. Shadow looked at RZER for guidance. RZER picked up the ball and gently tossed it toward Shadow with his snout. The throw was careful, not aggressive. Shadow caught it reflexively, confused by the game but not threatened. "Bring it back," the girl called. "Then I throw it again." Shadow approached slowly and dropped the ball. The girl threw it. Shadow chased it. Something clicked in her mind. This was pack behavior, but without the violence. Cooperation without competition. She brought the ball back faster this time. Within minutes, 5 more children had joined. 6 dread hounds were playing with them, including some who had been violent just hours before. David watched with tears in his eyes. "This is how we heal them," he said quietly. "Not with rules or training, with kindness and patience." The moment shattered when alarms blared across the settlement. Valorian ships had entered orbit. Long-range scans showed a fleet, not a scouting party. The Empire had come for revenge. RZER's body shifted instantly from play to combat mode. Around him, other dread hounds responded similarly. But their responses were chaotic. Some ran. Some attacked the nearest person. Some froze completely. Years of programming made them react to threats with confusion rather than coordination. David was already running toward the command center. "Get the children underground, all civilians to the bunkers, combat teams to defensive positions." RZER gathered the dread hounds who were stable enough to understand. Shadow, 3 others who had adjusted well, and a dozen more who seemed capable of following basic directions. It wasn't many, but it would have to be enough. The first Valorian dropships landed on the settlement's outskirts. Armored soldiers poured out, equipped with weapons designed specifically for killing dread hounds. They had learned from previous encounters. This assault was planned and precise. Human defenders opened fire from fortified positions. Their weapons were effective but limited. The Valorians had numbers and technology. Without the freed dread hounds helping, the settlement would fall within hours. Razor led his small pack toward the nearest landing zone. They moved as a unit, using tactics he remembered from his war beast days. But instead of attacking helpless civilians, they were defending them. The difference made him fight harder than he ever had before. Valorian soldiers died quickly. They expected dread hounds to be collared and controlled. Free war beasts fighting with purpose were something else entirely. Razor's claws tore through armor. Shadow flanked and eliminated snipers. The others followed their lead, learning cooperation through necessity. But more drop ships kept landing. For every Valorian they killed, 3 more appeared. The mathematics were against them. Then something changed. A roar echoed from the settlement center. One of the unstable dread hounds, a massive male who had been sedated earlier, had woken up. He charged into battle with no coordination, just pure rage. Normally, that would be a disaster. But the Valorian soldiers didn't know he was unstable. They saw a dread hound attacking and responded with their standard anti-collar protocols. Protocols that didn't work because he wasn't collared. The male's chaotic assault disrupted an entire Valorian formation. In the confusion, human defenders pushed forward. More dread hounds joined the fight, stable or not. Their lack of coordination became an advantage because the Valorians couldn't predict their movements. Razor saw the opportunity. He howled not a war cry but a rally call. Every dread hound on Target 7 heard it. Every single one responded. 273 war. Beasts converged on the Valorian invasion force. Some attacked wildly, some worked in packs, some just ran in circles creating chaos. It didn't matter. The sheer mass of freed dread hounds overwhelmed the organized military assault. The Valorian commander made a critical mistake. He activated a signal meant to trigger pain in collared dread hounds, hoping to disable them. Instead, the signal just made angry war beasts angrier because they had no collars to receive it. Razor fought alongside David and Briggs near the command center. A Valorian officer tried to activate a tactical retreat. Shadow took him down before he could complete the order. Without leadership, the Valorian soldiers broke formation. The battle lasted 3 more hours. When it ended, the settlement was damaged but standing. Valorian survivors fled to their ships and retreated into orbit. They had vastly underestimated what freed dread hounds could do when defending something they cared about. Razor stood in the settlement center, surrounded by exhausted humans and dread hounds. Many were injured, some were dead, but they had won, together. David approached with a medical kit, already treating wounded dread hounds. The Valorians will be back. They won't let this stand. Razor knew he was right. This wasn't over. It was barely beginning, but something had changed. The freed dread hounds had fought together, had protected humans who showed them kindness, had chosen to defend rather than destroy. Shadow sat beside him, panting heavily. "What now?" she managed to ask. Her voice was rough, unused to forming words, but she was trying. Razor looked at the sunset over Target 7, looked at human children cautiously approaching to check on their new friends, looked at dread hounds who were learning that strength could be used for protection instead of conquest. He tried to form words, really tried. His mouth shaped sounds carefully. "We teach others." It was only 3 words, but they were his first human words spoken aloud. David heard them and smiled through his exhaustion. Shadow's ears perked up in surprise. Other dread hounds nearby stopped and stared. The weapon of extinction was learning to speak, and what he had to say might just change everything. 6 months changed everything. Razor walked through the expanded settlement watching scenes that would have been impossible during his time as a weapon, a dread hound. Carefully carried building materials for human construction workers. Children rode on the backs of war beasts who moved with gentle precision. Shadow taught a class on nonviolent conflict resolution to both humans and newly freed dread hounds. David approached with news. Another transport arrived from the liberated colonies, 53 more dread hounds. They heard about Target 7 and wanted refuge. Razor nodded. His ability to speak had improved dramatically. How many hurt? Most of them, same story, collars, torture used as weapons. David's expression was sad but determined. We'll help them heal like we've helped the others. The settlement now housed over 400 dread hounds and 3,000 humans. More kept arriving weekly. Word had spread across the galaxy. Target 7 was a place where enemies became allies, where weapons learned to be people. The Valorian Empire was collapsing. Without their dread hounds, their military power had shattered. Conquered worlds were rebelling. Species they had enslaved for centuries were rising up. The news broadcasts David showed Razor painted a picture of an empire in its final days. But the Valorians weren't finished. Intelligence reports showed they were building something new, a weapon to destroy Target 7 completely, not an invasion, complete annihilation. Briggs called a meeting in the command center. Every able leader attended, human and dread hound alike. The holographic display showed the Valorian superweapon, a massive ship capable of rendering entire planets lifeless. It'll be operational in 3 weeks, Briggs explained. We can evacuate, scatter to other worlds, but Target 7 will be destroyed. No, Razor's voice was clear now, his pronunciation improving daily. This is home, we fight. Against that, a human soldier pointed at the display. Razor, I respect everything you've done, but this is suicide. That weapon will sterilize the entire planet. Shadow stood beside Razor. Her speaking ability had progressed faster than his. Then we stop weapon before it fires, strike first. With what fleet? Briggs asked. We have 2 ships. They have a battle group protecting the superweapon. Razor had been thinking about this problem for weeks. Not fight with ships, fight with what Valorians fear most. The room fell silent as they understood his meaning. Every freed dread hound in the galaxy was connected. Through a communication network the humans had established. There were now over 2,000 free war beasts across a dozen systems. All of them owed their liberation to Target 7. You want to gather every dread hound for an assault on the superweapon, David said slowly. Razor, that's beyond dangerous. Many of them are still healing, still learning to control their aggression. We'll die free, Razor replied, or live as slaves again, no other choice. The vote was unanimous. Within a week, dread hounds from across known space began arriving at Target 7. They came in stolen ships, captured transports, and modified cargo vessels. Each brought their own story of liberation, their own scars from Valorian cruelty. Razor stood before them all in the largest clearing they could create. 2,043 dread hounds, the largest gathering of free war beasts in history. Many were damaged, some were unstable, all were determined. We were weapons, Razor spoke carefully. His words were transmitted through speakers so all could hear. Made to destroy, trained to kill, knew only pain and orders, but humans showed us different way, showed us kindness, choice, freedom. Shadow continued where he paused. Now Valorians want to destroy those who freed us, want to kill humans who gave us hope. We say no. We who were weapons of extinction now choose what we fight for. The howl that rose from 2,000 dread hound throats shook the ground. It wasn't a war cry. It was a declaration. They were done being used, done being tools. If they fought now, it would be for something that mattered. The assault plan was insane. Dread hounds couldn't survive in space without protection, but they could survive for 15 minutes in the cargo bays of breaching pods. 15 minutes of vacuum exposure before their bodies shut down. It would be enough. Human pilots volunteered to fly the pods. David was among them. Razor tried to convince him to stay behind. David refused. You saved me first, David said simply. I'm not letting you do this alone. They launched the assault 4 days later. 50 breaching pods accelerated toward the Valorian superweapon while it was still under construction. Valorian defense ships moved to intercept, but they were designed to fight other ships, not small fast pods with no life support signals. The pods punched through the superweapon's hull. Dreadhounds poured into the interior, claws and teeth against metal and machinery. Valorian crew members tried to fight back. They died quickly. DXZER led the way to the main reactor. David stayed close, guiding him through technical systems DXZER didn't understand. Alarms blared, bulkheads sealed, emergency crews mobilized. None of it mattered. 2,000 Dreadhounds ripped the superweapon apart from the inside. They destroyed the reactor, shredded the weapon systems, tore through every critical system they could find. The ship was dead in 30 minutes. But escape pods were launching, Valorian leadership fleeing. DXZER couldn't let them go. They would just build another weapon, enslave another species, continue the cycle. He made the hardest choice of his life. Shadow, get everyone out, get them home. Shadow understood immediately. DXZER, no. Someone must stay, hold reactor, make sure ship truly dies. He looked at David. Get him home safe, tell them. Tell them weapons can choose to be heroes. David grabbed DXZER's fur. We find another way, you don't have to die here. Not dying, DXZER corrected gently. Choosing, big difference. Shadow had to physically drag David away. The other Dreadhounds retreated to the breaching pods. DXZER stayed behind, holding the reactor in a critical state. The superweapon began breaking apart. Escape pods scattered in all directions. But then something unexpected happened. Other Dreadhounds returned, first 10, then 30, then 100. They chose to stay with DXZER to ensure the mission completed. You should go, DXZER told them. We choose to stay, one replied. Choose to matter. In the end, DXZER did escape. Human engineers figured out how to remote detonate the reactor, but 147 Dreadhounds didn't make it out. They died as heroes, not weapons. Target 7 held a memorial 3 weeks later. Human and Dreadhound names were carved into stone together, warriors who had chosen to protect rather than destroy. David stood beside DXZER, both survivors, both changed forever. The Valorian Empire formally surrendered a month after that. Without their superweapon, without their war beasts, they had nothing left. The galaxy began healing. DXZER watched children play with young Dreadhounds in the settlement square. The newest generation knew nothing of collars or pain. They were growing up free, learning that strength meant protecting the weak, not dominating them. What will you do now? David asked. The war is over, you could go anywhere. DXZER considered the question. He could explore the galaxy, could find a quiet world and live in peace, could do anything he wanted. Stay here, he decided. Help others heal, teach young ones, build something better. David smiled. Still guarding me even when there's no danger. Not guarding you, DXZER corrected. His speech was nearly perfect now. Standing with you, friend. The word still meant more than any other. Friend. The concept that had saved him from being a weapon. That had shown him life had meaning beyond battle. That had proven even creatures designed for extinction could find something more important. DXZER had been created to end worlds. Instead, he helped birth a new one. A world where former enemies built a future together, where weapons became guardians, where extinction gave way to hope. And that was more than enough.